So I am about to play a clip of Mehdi Hasan being interviewed on LBC, sharing his thoughts about Netanyahu's proposed full occupation of Gaza. Listen closely for how different the interviewer behaves with Mehdi compared to how he and others on LBC would treat other pro-Palestinian journalists, up to and including the Palestinian ambassador Hussein Zomlot. Let's watch this together and I'll give my 2 cents at the end.
Mehdi Hasan is Editor-in-Chief and CEO of Zeteo news platform. Thanks for coming on the programme, Mehdi. It's good to see you again. I wonder what we're to make of these reports.
I mean, I would say don't be surprised by these reports. Some of us have been saying for 22 months that this was the goal, that this was never about hostages, this was never an anti-terror operation. This was an excuse by the Israeli far-right, which controls the Israeli government right now, to use the horror show, the massacres, the war crimes of October the 7th, to go back into Gaza and take back the land. It's always been about the land for these folks. And they're not hiding it. They've been saying it for months. And now Netanyahu's saying what his own cabinet ministers have been saying for months. Every time I came on a show like this and cited a cabinet minister, someone from the pro-Israel side would say, well, they're not the prime minister, they're not the main person, they're not in the war cabinet. Well, now you've got Netanyahu being quoted by security sources saying that this is the plan. They're doing it. They have a green light from the president of the United States. And this is what many of us warned about and worried about.
I guess part of the answer, or could be, unless you're right, that the whole aim was to reoccupy Gaza, that if Hamas were to release the hostages, there would be, one would have thought, no logical need to go and reoccupy the whole of Gaza until they do.
So a couple of things. I mean, we've been in hostage negotiations on and off for 22 months, especially since last summer when Joe Biden put out that plan and it was supposed, they blamed Hamas and the UN were involved and we've had back and forths. We had a ceasefire, let's not forget, Tom, earlier this year. Donald Trump, a man who I don't like to give credit to for anything, came into office shortly before he was sworn in, got this ceasefire. Some of us warned it was a fake ceasefire. It lasted only a couple of months because the Israelis never planned to stick with it. And Israel unilaterally broke that ceasefire, went back to war, imposed a siege, blocked infant formula and nappies from going into Gaza, and we are where we are. Israeli ministers, Tom, just to be clear to the LBC audience, say again and again that the hostages are not their priority. Those are not my words. The finance minister has said this. The settlements minister has said this. The heritage minister has said this. In fact, last week, Eliyahu, one of the ministers in Netanyahu's government, said we are racing ahead to totally destroy Gaza. We're going to make it all Jewish. I mean, there's no mention of the hostages in that statement. They have a very clear ideological goal, and, when people tell you who they are, believe them the first time.
So what do you see as if there is, what is the day after this war looking like, more and more, in your view?
Yeah, so that was a question posed. I mean, I've been talking about this since the very beginning, both when I was, I had my show at MSNBC, and then I've been doing interviews like this. And when I'm asked that question, the assumption is the war is ending. And I don't think the war is ending. I think Netanyahu, for both political and ideological reasons, is dragging this out. His own generals have told him there's no strategic value in dragging this out. I don't know if you saw on Sunday, I think it was, 19 former Israeli security chiefs, the heads of Mossad, Shin Bet, the military, the police, have come out saying there is no strategic goal here. We are not winning this war. We have not saved the hostages. This is about Netanyahu trying to save his own backside from going to prison. This is about him preserving his cabinet. So the premise of your question is slightly problematic because it implies there is some end point when the Israelis have made it clear there isn't an end point. This is full-on ethnic cleansing, and the President of the United States has given them a green light.
Recent history, relatively recent history, suggests it doesn't go well if you try and occupy a part of the world that is fundamentally hostile to you, to the forces that are going to attempt to occupy it. You'll be in something close to a forever war.
Yeah, which is what. So 2 things. One is you're right, and that's why so many military chiefs and experts are saying we shouldn't be doing this. There is no military value in occupying Gaza in this way. That's one point. The other point, of course, is that, let's just be clear, again, for the LBC audience, just to understand the law here, Gaza is occupied, according to the International Court of Justice, according to the United Nations. Even though the Israelis pulled out their, even though the Israelis pulled out their settlers in 2005, they removed the settlements from Gaza. They controlled Gaza's air, land borders, waters, who goes in and out, what goes in and out. So that's what the Gazans have been under for a siege for a while. Both Gaza and the West Bank are occupied under international law. What Netanyahu's proposing to do now is going an extra further and annexing Gaza, making Gaza part of Israel. And of course, here's the key point. which is what the world cannot tolerate, I hope, which is ethnically cleansing 2 million people from Gaza. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Balkans, Tom. Like, ethnic cleansing in Europe was seen as the greatest crime since World War II. The Serbs were the bad guys. Milosevic went to The Hague. This is what Israel's doing now on steroids.
One would have to disagree with your premise that this was the goal from the start in order to argue this, but let's, for argument's sake, walk it through.
Yep. Okay.
That if Hamas were to surrender and were to disarm, there would be no need, in theory, for Israel to worry about the security threat coming from Gaza if the organisation that committed terrorist atrocities on October the 7th ceased to exist.
Yeah, but I mean, if it ceased to exist, sure, but like, that's not how international politics works, right? You can't just fantasize a solution and make it happen. They do exist, right? They do exist. They are fighting. They haven't been destroyed by Israel. I mean, Israel's failed in its own goals of destroying Hamas. If that's a goal you support as an Israeli or supporter of Israel, it hasn't happened. That's why these 19 security chiefs are speaking out. The 19 security chiefs who are speaking out, the former heads of Mossad, they're not pro-Hamas, Tom, are they? They're not. Sure. No one would accuse any of them. They're saying that this is a war that isn't working, right? If anything, it's helping Hamas. Some of us said this on October 8th, 9th, 10th, 2023. If you do this, all you're doing is you are perpetuating the violence. If you kill thousands of Palestinians, leave thousands of Palestinian children orphaned, what do you think they're going to do other than join Hamas? If you destroy Hamas, you don't think...
But was that a rejection, Mehdi, of any attempt by Israel to kill the people who committed October the 7th? Were you implacably opposed to any sort of...
Not at all. Not at all. No. Not at all. I think that, look, again, Israel as a country was always going to respond to October the 7th. It would be ridiculous to think that Israel was going to do anything. The issue is how you respond.
Of course.
And those of us who had seen Israel in 2014, in 2009, in 2018, remember, the world did not begin on October the 7th, Tom. We have precedents. We have history. Israel's been bombing and besieging Gaza for decades. The 2014 war, they killed hundreds of Palestinians, including kids. None of us, even I didn't imagine it would be this brutal, this prolonged, this destructive. It's an actual full-blown genocide at this point. So the question is, can Israel respond when its citizens are killed in a horrific massacre? Of course, every country should have a right to protect its citizens from being massacred, but no country has the right to do a genocide as part of its counter-terror operation. That's what you want to, or B, revenge. And again, this was always about vengeance. There's been reporting in the Israeli media, Tom, that from the very beginning, they were bombing sites that they were told there might be hostages there. And they said, we don't care. If you read the reporting from Plus 972, they were saying, we don't care. It was never about the hostages. It was about vengeance. It was about using this as an opportunity to go and try and destroy Hamas. It was about taking back the land.
Obviously, you use the word genocide there. That is an opinion rather than a fact of the court who have to rule on that for now. Can I ask you about another area?
It's the opinion. It's the opinion of most genocide scholars who have looked at this.
Yeah.
Mehdi broke down the entirety of the situation, and he is probably one of the foremost voices, definitely one of the foremost non-Palestinian voices that speaks on this issue. And because, I have to say, he speaks with a British accent, because he's, went to a very good university, his journalistic colleagues are aware of that and don't treat him with the same disrespect that I've heard them treat people like the Palestinian ambassador Hossein Zomlot, or people like Bassam Youssef, who have a much more vested interest in the Palestinian crisis, being Palestinian themselves, or have much more skin in the game. But they are constantly disrespected when they come and speak on British media outlets. So he's an extremely important voice. And as he explained in that interview, he has been one of the very few voices banging the drum from pretty much 3-4 days after October the 7th. They all knew where this was going. I would add to that, you've got people like James O'Brien, who's also on LBC. He was also one of the most prevalent voices very early on, who had a sort of inkling about where this was going to go. And here we are, almost 24 months later, and now Trump's in power. We finally got to the point where they are telling us what they've wanted to do all along. Netanyahu doesn't care about the hostages. He cares about leaving a legacy He wants to create a greater Israel, and he's supported by the far right in his party. And he also wants to stay out of prison. And this is the other thing. So you have him wanting to leave a lasting legacy because he knows he messed up over October the 7th. All of the reporting indicates that. So he's got a debt to repay in his mind. But it's also about him and his freedom and wanting to stay out of prison. So this is going to be how this plays out over the next few weeks and months. It's going to be really, really interesting to see. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.